Before we get started, let's remind ourselves what our aims are. We want something that sounds professional. That usually means something that sounds like it was recorded in a professional studio. Something that sounds similar to how we hear drums on the records that we love. Something that sounds tight, something that has a bit of weight, something that has texture to it, a pleasing texture to it. Now, what I've done before we get started, as I said, here's the unmixed drums and here's the drums as they will sound at the end of this video. So the unmixed drums, and I've leveled them off so they're more or less the same on the VU meter here. Sorry, on the volume meter here, which is this guy. Right, minus infinity here, you can see the unmixed drums come out about minus 18. The mixed drums minus 17. So maybe I'll break this up by 1. Now, so let's compare the other characteristics. This sounds both flat and open. Flat in that I can't sense any real depth to it. Or this is depth. You know, this is a 3D sound image to my mind. I can sense a front and a back. Where this is all front. Texture wise, the cymbals here remind me of scrunching up tinfoil, which is not a pleasant sound. They're kind of tamed here. It's a lot smoother sounding. Weight wise, in the low end, it's a lot kind of more rounded. The snare has some nice definition, some nice texture to it. I like when you can almost hear dust on something. Gives that real world sound. Again, this is just too flat to have any real texture. And just it hasn't got the impact that this has. Possibly I've gone too loud on the kick. You can correct that in your version. In this video, we're going to look at mixing drums. I'm going to use the Dancing in the Moonlight project. And let's just start. I want to make sure that there's going to be drums playing from when I press start. So I'm just going to click here. You know, I could click somewhere, anywhere along the playback, and then the pause bar, the space bar on the computer will let me start and stop. Okay, so I'm going to go from there. And first thing I'm going to do is create a rough mix. Actually, no, that's not the first thing I'm going to do. The first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to group the overheads into a channel together. Now, so I click one, I press shift on the keyboard and press the other. You can see they're both highlighted. So I'm going to right click, I'm going to go group tracks, and I'm going to rename this overheads. Now I can do my rough mix. So to do that, I'm going to take the overheads fader down. I'm going to take these faders down as well. Now, on your recording of drums, you don't have a snare underneath, so I'm going to get rid of that. So for the drums, you're looking at now 3 volume levels, the kick, the snare, and the overheads. Something else I'm going to do to the overheads before my rough mix is I'm going to pan them slightly left and slightly right. Let me just get a listen to those, make sure it sounds okay. Okay. Now, so we have a stereo image of the overheads without it being too zoomed in. So I'll pull that down again. Now, top of the mix is going to be the snare. So I'm going to bring this up first. Bring it up to about -6 so I have some place to go with it. Okay, a fair bit of hi-hat. Okay, bring it up to about 0 here. So it's peaking at about -12. So that means I still have a good way to go if I need to bring anything louder. Now I'm going to join in with the kick. And I'm just going to increase the volume until it sits with the snare. I don't want the kick to sound too big. See, that just makes the snare to sound small. I don't want it to be lost either. I just want them to sound like they're part of the same kit, with neither drum being too big or too small. Bring it down a tiny bit. Okay. Now I'm going to add the overheads in. And I'm just going to fill in out the blanks here. I'm listening to the hats. I know we've got a bit of everything in on this channel, but I'm listening to the hats and I'm placing the hats against the snare and the kick. Okay, that sounds all right. For a rough mix, I'm probably going to have to revisit it later. So now I'm going to go to my individual channels, and with the kick, the first thing I'm going to do is I'll solo it. You can just about hear the snare coming through there. So let's fix that. Let's go to audio effects, dynamics, gate, gated drums, drag it out. Okay, so remember this. You can see the threshold line here is not being reached by the majority of these kicks. So bring the threshold line down. Now the gate's opening. These shadowy parts there, they're probably the snare. But I'm getting that kind of clicky style pop because the start of the kick is being deformed by the gate. In other words, the gate isn't opening quick enough to leave the very first part of the kick through. So we're getting this kind of almost snipped sound from the start of the drum waveform. Now, to fix that, I'm going to turn on the look ahead, which makes it open a little bit ahead of time. See what it's like on the 10. Okay, it's very natural. It's kind of a natural sounding track, so I think I'll go with that. Now, next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to compress it. With the compressor, I'm going to try the acoustic kick compressor first off. Let's try that. Now it's not doing a hell of a lot. There's the threshold line, and this line here tells us how much the compressor is pulling down the volume. So let's put it down another bit. Now let's try it with this turned off to see if we're fooling ourselves. Remember, if something's louder, it's going to sound better. But if we want this louder, we can just turn it up. That's not what the compressor is supposed to do. It's supposed to add like an authority, a thickness, a density to the sound. Now, if we add too much compression, that density will actually make the sound too compact. It'll make it small. We don't want that. Okay, here's it without the compressor. Okay. Yeah, it's definitely louder with the compressor, but not by much. Let's try this. Okay, without. Okay, it's pretty subtle. It's just a little bit denser, a little bit tighter with the compressor on. Both things I want. Now, let's do some starter EQing. We'll just listen to that kick. Now let's go back and look at our interactive EQ chart. Now, is this the picture of it? Yeah, here we go. Okay. Now, we're on the kick. Let me just pause this for a second. We're on the kick. So, punch, looking over here, yeah? Punch, fullness, attack. The hollowness around 400, muddiness around 800. So let's see. Okay. Okay, seems to have punch, but it doesn't have much in the way of low end body. Okay, that seems to bring it forward a little bit. Now, 400, where's 400? Here. No, I don't think I need that. So what other was it? What else was it suggesting? Attack between 3 and 5k. Let's go back. Oops. 3 and 5k. Okay, there's 3. Okay, a little boost there might be nice. Excuse me. So let's go on to the snare. Now let's see how we get on with the gate. Okay, so it leaves a rattle of hi-hat through. Let's see how hear how that sounds with. All of a sudden, the snare sounds pretty loud, doesn't it? Okay. Doesn't sound super choppy though. You know, I can't hear that choppiness in the hi-hats by getting turned on and off by the bit that's allowed through by the gate on this channel, mixing with this channel. Okay, so we're all right there. Let's go to the compressor and we'll try the precise preset. Okay, there's a definite loudness increase here. Remember, 10 dB is twice as loud. But it might take you more experimenting to get to where you need to be with this. Okay, with the compressor. With the compressor. Can you hear it just kind of smacks a little bit more with the compressor on? Now, maybe I need to adjust the volume a little bit more. Remember, I wanted the same volume with the compressor on as off, so I know what the compressor is doing. Okay, can you hear what it's doing now? It's actually doing a little bit too much. So I'm going to push this back up here. If I press the shift key, I can do fine adjustments using the arrow keys on the keyboard. Okay. Now, I've made that nice and tight. The acoustic naturalness of the sound is still going to come through on the overhead, so I don't think I'm making it too aggressive. Let's have a look at the EQ. Now, if we're to take our tips from here, the snare has a ring around 900. I think it's different with each snare, to be honest. Fullness around 120 to 240, and attack between 2.5 and 5k, and then snap above 10k. Now, as well as the snap, we're going to get some of that hi-hat is going to be up there as well. Right, so let's go back to live. Now, I'm forgetting those already. So let's have a listen. The ring around 900. Maybe I'll bring that ring back a little bit, but then to make up for what I've done, that's quite nice there. I can refer back to here to see what I've done. I brought back up some of the attack. Now, fullness. Does it sound full enough to you? 2 to 4k. Now, this is currently at one of these shelf EQs, yeah? So I'm going to change it to the bell, which is this one. Oh, you can hear it adding. Go with the body there. Question is it overdoing it? Okay, I think that's all right for me. Let's have a listen all together. Bring down the volume a bit to compensate for what I've done. Now, I can hear the action of the gate a little bit, that this is kind of dry. I can't hear the action of the gate on the hi-hats necessarily. Let me check. No, the hi-hats sound okay, but the gate or the snare is starting to sound a little bit processed now. So this could be my chance then to add a nice reverb to it in a subtle way, and I'm going to go for the hybrid reverb drums to save a lot of experimentation, because we tried one of these in class and it worked pretty well. It's either Fat Drum Studio or Drums in a Canyon. Let's try Fat Drum Studio. Now, that's entirely wet. Dry, the reverb is doing nothing. Okay, so we'll keep that there for a minute. I'll just turn it off so I can't hear it. And let's just try the drums in a canyon. That's a bit too much. We could try a different reverb. Try one of these reverbs. Room. There's a drum room here somewhere, isn't there? Dark medium drum room. Let's try that. Yeah, see if I can up the decay on this one. Sounds a bit artificial, that one. Maybe a little bit of that is okay. Now, get rid of the ones I'm not using. Now, onto the overheads. With the overheads, I'm not going to gate them because it'll just sound choppy and weird. I'm not going to compress them for similar reasons. They're going to get a bit of compression off the drum bus, so I'll wait till then. I am going to go into the EQ. I'm going to go to EQ 8. And I don't want phase issues between whatever of the kick is coming through here, which is probably very little. It's barely anything. Well, let's tidy it up anyway. I don't want these messy bits here. Now, another area that often causes trouble with drums is around 400 hertz here. Things can energy can kind of build up here and it can get boxy. Let's just have a listen to what that sounds like. It might not be a problem on this yet. Okay, boxy is more here, I suppose. Yeah, there's that cardboard box beating sound. But it can get a bit too stiff up around here. Now, that's a bit too much, too wide. See how wide that is? Right, let's just... funky playing going on there of the bad type. Okay, I quite like that. There's something I don't like about the high end here. It's probably the cymbals are not great. So this EQ is not going to do it because it's just too broad, too big, you know. So I'm going to go to this one. And I'm going to narrow the Q. Yeah, so the Q, remember? Narrow, wide. Something kind of sloshy about those hi-hats, so I'm going to try and make it worse first. Okay, so that's around what? 4. I like that. Now there's kind of a dustiness that's coming through off the snare. Now I could decide to get rid of a lot more of the high end. Hear that? Tss, tss, tss. Maybe control that a little bit. Now, hear what it sounds like together. I'm going to tuck that snare back down. Unfortunately, I've gone off the snare now a little bit. Maybe it needs to be less punchy. Let's try the look ahead. Not quite as aggressive, still quite big. I'm going to bring down these frequencies a little bit. Okay. Now, hi-hats are still kind of not lovely, but we've tamed this a good bit. So what I'm going to do next is I'm going to add these into a drum bus. So I'm going to select the overheads bus, press shift, select the snare and select the kick, right click them and go group tracks, and then I'm going to rename this drum bus, and we're going to get out some serious device now called the drum bus. So you might remember the drum bus. This is like, I don't know, it's like adding chili to a meal. A little bit can be great. Too much of it just turns it into a different type of dinner, makes it inedible. Oh, sorry, it's in drive and color. Drum bus, yeah. So we can go nuts with this thing, but we just have to remember the type of music that we're working with. You see straight away it adds something. It has a little bit of distortion. And you can change you make that, see, the dampening basically is like a filter after the distortion that this adds. Yeah, it doesn't dampen the whole sound, but it just dampens the distortion that this adds. See, it's only distorting below 1.17 kilohertz now. Only dampening the lows. You can increase that, exaggerate it. It's not bad actually, I like that. Because it leaves out the hi-hats. Now it's taking in the hi-hats. Okay, it's just kind of below where this is cutting, so it's adding harmonics, adding distortion from about there down. Now I could add boom. Ridiculous, like an 808. Well, a little bit of it though, it's good. Now, where it goes nuts if I had compression. But let's blend it in. Without it. Well, that's okay. Now, I'm getting a bit of ring coming off the snare. You hear that? Right, now let's... Yeah, there's a kind of a... Yeah, there's a ring off the snare. But it's not in one zone, it seems to... It's kind of there. Ah, I got it. Okay. So number 5, I turn 5 off. Do you hear that? You know, so I did a typical thing there of finding where the problem was by trying to make it worse and then just cutting it. Okay. Now let's go back to here. Now, so maybe I have to do the same thing. I do have to do the same thing on this channel here. So number 5 is at 774. So I need to do a narrow cut on 774 here. So I'm going to turn on 5 there. It doesn't matter which one I do. Now go 774. I'll type this in. Make it a narrow Q. I'm gonna okay. Now, reasonably happy with that. So we'll look at the guitar in the next one. Thank you.